Okay, Chair Klein, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I call the meeting to order. And please mute your microphone and stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Klein,
Present.
Commissioner Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Condon,
Present.
Commissioner Larios,
Here.
Commissioner Morfin,
Here.
Commissioner Sakshava,
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
I am here.
You have a quorum.
City Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
I'll move Larios.
Is there a second?
I will second Sachdeva.
Motion
Thank
by
you.
Commissioner Larios, seconded by Commissioner Sachdeva to approve the agenda. I'll call the roll. Chair Klein,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Commissioner Larios,
Yes.
Commissioner Morfin,
Yes.
Commissioner Sakshava,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we will take public comments from members of the audience. If you would like to provide public comment through Zoom, please click the raise hand button.
We have one raised hand from a Steve Freed. I'll go ahead and allow them to talk.
If I could clarify, this public comment portion is for items not on the agenda. When we get to the 2 or 3 specific items, you'll have an opportunity to address the commission at that time. So if you're raising your hand to speak on the public safety special parcel tax or the minutes or warehouse regulations, hold tight just a minute.
And I see all the hands were lowered. Let me go ahead and remove this permission to talk. At this time, we have no raised hands.
Let's just give everyone a minute to make sure they can connect. The problem with the internal link, Carlos, I know that's what you're worried about, is that the city's cache doesn't allow people to, it doesn't refresh for some reason. So I think that's the problem with one of the staff members struggling to get in. But we do have 45 attendees at this meeting. So if there's someone specific that's trying to get in, please let me know and we will work with them.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we're at public comment for items not on the agenda. If anyone wishes to address the commission on something that isn't related to the warehouse moratorium or the special tax, please raise your hand at this point. I think that we can move on to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, we will now go to presentations.
Item number 1 is selection of chair and vice chair. I will present the item in just 1 second. So Chair Klein has amazingly served us as chair for the last couple years, and unfortunately, per the municipal code, is no longer eligible to serve as our chair. So it would be appropriate for the commission to select a chair and a new vice chair. The code says that the seats should be from different appointing categories. So we have business representatives, real estate representatives, a council member, and an employee labor representative. So if the chair is from one category, the vice chair should be from a different category. At this time, I would gladly take a motion to select a chair.
I would like to nominate myself to be the chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry, was that Klein?
Jack Klein will second.
If you could, when you make motions, please state your last name because it's hard for me to catch them
Sure.
sometimes. So motion by Commissioner Sakhtova, seconded by Chair Klein for Commissioner Sakhtova to serve as chair. I will call the roll. unless there are any other nominations. Okay, Chair Klein,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Commissioner Larios,
Yes.
Commissioner Morfin,
Yes.
Commissioner Saktava,
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Absolutely, yes.
Excellent. Now it would be appropriate for a motion to select the vice chair. And at the same time, I'm hopeful that my staff can make sure now Chair Saktava gets the script so that he can utilize that to run the meeting. So looking for a motion for vice chair.
Do I have a nomination for vice chair?
I said a motion to nominate myself, Chair Morfin. Commissioner Morfin, sorry.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Condon.
That was Condon. Motion by Commissioner Morfin, seconded by Commissioner Condon to select Commissioner Morfin as vice chair. Chair Saktava,
Yes.
Commissioner Klein,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Commissioner Larios,
Yes.
Commissioner Morfin,
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, let's just give Chair Saktava a minute to see if he received an email with the meeting script.
This takes effect immediately. Is that what you're saying, Lisa?
I'm sorry,
This takes effect immediately?
immediately.
Wow. Congratulations, Jack. Hell of a transition.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Jack. You did it. You've done a great job as chair. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jack.
Unless Chair Saktava would prefer that Chair Klein or Commissioner Klein finish this meeting, we can do that as well.
I will gladly oblige. That's fine. Yes, you.
All right, Chair Klein, or Commissioner/Chair Klein, you can finish the meeting as chair.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? We do, and we've had a first and a second, and we voted.
We
So,
did that. Mhm.
Okay.
I have way too many windows open. I'm trying to help you, but I've lost it as well.
Yeah, you're going to introduce agenda item 2, I believe.
There we go. Right. Agenda item 2 is public safety special parcel tax. And City Administrator Fandino and Finance Director Wall will present the item.
Yes, good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the Commission. We have a brief item that is a continuation of the last meeting, May 12, where at that time we presented and discussed the extension or the potential extension of the public safety special parcel tax. Now, at that time, the Commission was presented with the details, a background of the tax, as well as some impacts of its sunsetting. And during the discussion, some additional items and details were requested, and that's the nature of this presentation. So as mentioned, we have City Administrator Fandino, as well as our police chief available for discussion, and the chief is actually going to cover one of these slides.
And I'm sorry, Scott, if I could just, and Chief, if I could just interrupt for a minute. The presentations were emailed to the commission just at the start of the meeting. So if you wanted to follow along on your email, you did get a copy.
So this is our overview. Again, we just have a couple of slides in the deck here, but we're going to review the scheduled sunsetting of the special parcel tax. And of course, both the operational and fiscal impacts that would entail. We'd like to present the potential continuation of the special tax. The chief is going to cover some staffing comparisons in nearby cities and communities, And from there, we will open it up for discussion. So the nature of this tax, the city of Vernon, as commission is well aware, we are subject to the impacts of the surrounding communities. And as this tax underpins the budgets of several of our departments related to public safety, these are areas that would be impacted. So property crime, homelessness, including the actual contact with the mental health crisis that is ongoing. It would impact response times, as well as other related services. So should the tax expire, this would have an impact to 3 departments, the fire department, or the funding that is allocated to that, police, as well as health services. The actual fiscal impact is above 2 million. It's 2.2 million current fiscal year, and that's general fund revenue. And just to put it in perspective, the 2.2 million is approximately 16% of the police department's budget in the current fiscal year. One of the questions that was addressed, or one of the requests from the last meeting, was a computation of taking the rate of the tax back to the original baseline, and what would that look like. So just by way of reminder, the bar on the right hand side is from 2013, when the tax was initially put in place or voter approved, and then the current rate. So you can see the fractional increases over the last 9 years. So the overall impact, if we were to take this back to baseline, would be approximately 421,000 general fund revenue, which, again, just to put it in perspective, is approximately 3% of PD's operational budget. And of course, that would have an impact to service levels that are currently delivered to the community. So continuation of the tax. This is our current rate. So the bars represent the revenue in the coming out years, and with the fractional increases that are already in place. They're fairly modest. As you can see, the first bullet there, 46,000 is what the approximate amount that is added. And again, this would, the removal of this tax would have an impact to the service level to the community. At this time, I'm going to transition over to the chief, who'll join us and give us an overview of the levels of staffing in some of the surrounding communities.
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners and everyone else listening in on the Zoom meeting. At the last Business and Industry Commission meeting, it was asked that I bring back a survey of the surrounding cities near Vernon, looking at their sworn police officer size. I felt it was appropriate to put it here in this graph where you see the area in square miles of the area policed for each of those cities, the population for those cities, the overall department staff, and then in the very last column, it touches on the actual sworn police officer positions. You will see a disparity between the sworn police officer positions and the actual overall size of the department. That is, for example, if I picked out Huntington Park in their total police department staffing, they have parking enforcement, community service officers, jail staff, animal control, crime scene techs. They have a larger records department and a larger dispatch center. So that's why that number may look that different. Some departments, depending on the needs of their community, have more non-sworn staff. So I was asked to bring this back, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end if anybody has.
Thank you. So in conclusion, the two options as we see it are, one is to allow the expiration of the existing public safety special parcel tax. And of course, we would have to manage the impacts to service delivery to the community in the 3 affected departments. What we are recommending for the commission's consideration and ultimately recommendation to the council is preservation of the existing parcel tax at the current rate. And this will safeguard the service delivery to the community. We have some ideas on how far out, but ultimately that is the recommendation or the direction of our city administrator. So we're all 3 available for discussion, and that concludes our brief presentation.
Just real quickly, I think the population listed under Vernon is this 55,000. That isn't accurate, is it?
Yeah, that's a daytime population.
Oh, interesting. Okay, makes sense. Now it makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else for questions or discussion?
And then the population for the other cities listed here, are they also daytime population, or are they actual registered, residents of those cities?
Good question. They are residents from those cities. We pulled that off of the most recent census.
And the reason for that is those are residential cities. So because we're unique, trying to put an apples to apples comparison. Okay, well, that does conclude our report. And again, we're available for any further direction from the commission.
And this is not direction. This is just a question from Commissioner Klein. Is there? You mentioned extension of in terms of time frame to continue to evaluate. What's the proposed extension?
So and I'll let Carlos comment on this, but we're targeting 5 years, as that will correspond with the other goals that within both the city and the utility. What that gives the flexibility is, so what we're recommending that it's not locked in forever, but that we will revisit the issue. We will give a review of the financial condition of the city at that time, and make some recommendations from there going forward.
Okay, so this will include a sunset provision for 5 years in it.
Yeah, Jack, so the sunset provision that we're going to put in there is for 5 years, and we'll revise it in 2028. The goal here is for the city to take a look at what revenues they're receiving in 2028. Although I don't know what's going to happen by the year 2028, but if our plan comes to fruition, then we may be able to eliminate this tax altogether, given the circumstances of what we're seeing as far as the commerce we're trying to bring into Vernon. So we didn't feel comfortable trying to extend this past that 2028 mark, and eventually we'd like to see this go away. And so we're just looking for a bridge from now through 2028 to get us through when we can revisit the UUT, and gives a little bit of time for this other commerce to come online.
Makes sense.
And then Carlos, just Commissioner Condon here, just to clarify, the public safety tax is a tax that is paid by manufacturers in the city. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So the warehousers are not part of this. This is simply something that's charged to cold storage and manufacturing operations.
Yeah, the calculation is different, but that's the target group. It's not a large tax. It's, less than $2.2 million. But essentially, there is a special warehouse tax that is taxed differently for warehousing in Vernon.
Thank you.
And we have a question to Mr. Carlos. Now, the City Council did approve the special, warehouse tax in the last commission meeting, right?
No, that's already been approved. It was approved back in 2008, I believe. So that's something that has been going on and on for many years, and that does not have a sunset. Is that what you're referring to, Commissioner? Or are you referring to?
I mean, I did, see the, meeting. I was, going through COVID and I couldn't attend it properly, but I did hear that something was passed along the lines of, warehouse tax. I think it was an increase or, something like that.
Yes, so each year there is an adjustment, and that is adjusted according to CPI. So that happens each year with both the warehouse as well as the public safety tax. It was noted in those staff reports, and those were from the last council meeting, that the adjustment per the code is up to the total of CPI, which at the time of those staff reports was above 8%, 8.6%. We felt that was, I mean, all the businesses are feeling the impacts of inflation. We felt that was just a bit too steep in a given year after we've had 2% year after year after year. And so the recommendation that was made to the city administrator and ultimately made and passed by the council was to meet the businesses halfway, and it was only adjusted half of CPI because of the accelerated inflation that we're all experiencing.
So Commissioner, you're right. It was approved at the last council meeting, but that was for the adjustment for CPI.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Doug Williams here. As I'm hearing this and as I'm looking at it, we're talking about a $46,000 increase in overall tax increase on this specific line item to enable Chief Souza to do his job with his crew the best as possible to protect our properties in Vernon. It seems the most minuscule of increases overall, and if Administrator Fandino wants to go out 5 years, we're talking about a $200 and some odd $1,000 number over the 5 years. I think in my view, we're taking a lot of time to deal with a $46,000 overall increase over existing tax. To turn it off, I think is nuts. So I think the commission ought to, in its wisdom, approve this continuation of the current PSSPT and move on.
Okay, I think we're done, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug.
If that's a motion,
I think we have a
Commissioner
motion.
Condon, if that was a motion, Commissioner Condon seconds it.
It was more of a recommendation than a motion, but in particularity to now that we're on a commission, I will revise it to a motion.
Let's
right,
hold
then.
off on the motion until we see if anyone wants to address the commission, if possible.
Yeah, why don't we hold off on that? That's a great
Thank you.
idea.
Is there any public comment?
There are currently no raised hands.
Okay. Now, Doug, may I have a motion
I have a motion to allow the continuation of the parcel, the tax, public safety special parcel tax as presented by the Vernon Finance Department and Carlos Fandino, the city administrator, to allow for a $46,000 overall annual increase to the police budget so they can do their job.
Okay, so we have essentially a motion to approve
Correct.
what the staff has presented. And Tom, do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. We will now go to new business.
Sorry, just a second, Chair
sorry.
Klein.
We won't.
Finance Director Williams, does that get you what you need?
Yes, I believe we have our direction. Just for the benefit of the commission, this will be presented to the council. And from there, it will advance to a ballot measure.
So the motion is to recommend the continuance of the tax as proposed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So I'll call the roll. Commissioner Klein,
Yes.
Chair Saktava,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morfin,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes,
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone?
You missed me, Larios, but yeah.
Sorry, Commissioner Larios. Motion carries.
Thank you.
We will now go to new business.
How about the consent calendar first?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Top of page 3.
We will now go to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar may be approved with one motion. Items may be removed from the consent calendar by any commissioner. Those items removed will be considered immediately after the consent calendar. Do any commissioners wish to pull the item from the consent calendar? All right. Are there any public comments on the consent calendar?
There are no raised hands.
May I have a motion for consent calendar item number 3?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second
I'll
that.
second. Larios.
Motion by Commissioner Condon, seconded by Commissioner Larios to approve the consent calendar. Commissioner Klein,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes,
Commissioner Larios,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morfin,
Yes.
Chair Saktava,
Yes.
Chair Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we will now go to new business.
The moment we've been waiting for. Item number 4 is warehouse regulation, and Public Works Director Wall will present the item.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Let me see, let me share this with you. All right, I'm Dan Wall, Director of Public Works. And in this presentation, I'm going to go over warehouse development, including the city's concerns about health and environmental impacts, traffic and safety impacts, and the potential for state involvement in the city's land use decisions and policies. I will also go over city staff's proposed changes to the zoning code to address these concerns and a proposed implementation timeline. Warehouse development. In recent years, the proliferation of e-commerce and consumer expectation of rapid delivery have created a boom in warehouse development. With its ports, population centers, and transportation network, California has been especially affected by this trend. The volume of truck traffic generated by warehouses creates significant environmental impacts. Vernon, similar to the rest of California, has experienced significant warehouse development. In fact, 13 out of the 14 projects currently in the development pipeline with the city are warehouses. The vacancy rate in the city of Vernon is exceptionally low, and this increases the value of property, which in turn encourages a greater intensity of use at the warehouses, which increases additional truck trips. Additionally, advances in robotics have reduced the number of people who are employed by these facilities. Currently, there is no regulation specific to warehouses in the city of Vernon. So the city's concerns. City staff is concerned with community health and environmental impacts, traffic and safety impacts, and the threat of state involvement in regulating land uses in Vernon. Trucks going to and from warehouses are generally diesel powered. Diesel engines produce a toxic mixture of air pollutants that have negative health impacts. One class of these pollutants is diesel particulate matter, which contains the known carcinogens, benzene and formaldehyde. Diesel particulate matter is a subset of particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in diameter, known as PM2.5. PM2.5 is the particulate matter in air pollution most associated with adverse health effects. Now, the state of California has created a tool called CalEnviroScreen, and that's shown on this slide. CalEnviroScreen identifies California communities that are most affected by pollution. And this tool shows that the city is in the 98th percentile for its overall pollution burden, and that we are in the 88th percentile for both our PM2.5 and diesel particulate levels. With such high numbers, the city is concerned for the safety and welfare of Vernon residents and those living and working in Vernon and surrounding communities. By adopting Urgency Ordinance 1283, which was the interim warehouse moratorium, the City Council has acknowledged the risk posed by unfettered warehouse development. This action allowed staff to engage in analysis and study to develop a tailored zoning ordinance that addresses the safety and health impacts of warehouse development. The truck traffic generated by Vernon's warehouses and the impacts that traffic brings does not stop at the city limits, but continues into the surrounding communities. And these are communities that have larger residential populations than Vernon and that are also significantly impacted by pollution. Regionally, the Attorney General's Bureau of Environmental Justice has become involved with the impacts created by warehouse uses. Traffic and safety. In addition to the health and environmental impacts warehouse generated truck traffic creates, it also creates congestion, noise, and vibration. These trucks travel city streets to reach their destinations and, because of their sheer size, pose unique and challenging traffic issues such as increased safety risk for smaller vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and impact upon public property and facilities through collisions with infrastructure such as streetlights, traffic signals, signs, trees, curbs, and medians. Trucks hitting power poles, even when the pole is not significantly damaged, result in power interruptions, and trucks are the primary cause of pavement damage to our streets. Earlier, I mentioned that the Attorney General was becoming involved in warehouse issues. Last July, the Attorney General sued the City of Fontana and a warehouse developer over the approval of a warehouse development. In April, a settlement was announced. The settlement included requiring Fontana to adopt the most stringent warehouse regulations in the state, and the developer being forced to contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars to a community fund. I do not want to see the state dictating land use regulation in Vernon. Vernon is uniquely industrial and intends to retain self-determination in the regulation of land use and development. Currently, warehouse development is not regulated in the city. My fear is that without a process to mitigate impacts of warehouse development, the Attorney General will dictate how warehouses are developed and potentially other uses and how they should be regulated in Vernon. The use of a development agreement would allow for a collaborative approach between city staff and the developer to create mitigation that's tailored to fit each development. Staff is proposing that future warehouse development be approved through development agreements. Development agreements would allow for a collaborative creation of mitigations designed for each development with the goal of ensuring that the city maintains self-determination over land use regulation and that those regulations are not dictated to us by the state. Since agreements would be presented to the City Council for approval, an environmental analysis would need to be performed. While in many jurisdictions, this analysis could add a year or more to the development timeline, Vernon would diligently work to streamline this process. Now, exemptions to this proposal. Exemptions to this proposal would be for warehouse developments on lots less than 150,000 square feet. So that's a little over 3.4 acres. And they would continue to be on a by right basis. Warehouse projects having made submittals prior to June 21st, 2022, which was the date the moratorium was adopted, would also be exempt from the new regulation in the same way that these same projects were exempt from the moratorium. Again, development agreements would allow for the collaborative creation of mitigations designed to fit each development with the goal of ensuring that the city maintains self-determination over land use and that the state does not dictate these regulations to us. So what happens if we maintain the status quo? As I had mentioned earlier, currently warehouses are allowed by right with no opportunity for analysis or oversight. If we do nothing, the city risks the Attorney General's Bureau of Environmental Justice dictating development standards. Since the proliferation of warehouse facilities presents several issues for the community and city, including environmental and health, traffic and safety, land use, and fiscal impacts, it is recommended that future warehouse developments be approved via individual development agreements. Since development agreements will require environmental analysis, and since smaller warehouses do not have the same potential to impact the community as larger warehouses do, staff is recommending that warehouse projects on parcels less than 150,000 square feet in area be exempt from the new regulation. So next steps. After obtaining policy guidance from the BIC, staff will undertake the following next steps. We'll draft a proposed permanent ordinance that would change new warehouse uses on lots encompassing 150,000 square feet or more in area from allowance by right to approval through a development agreement. Next, we'd publish a notice of public hearing on the proposed permanent ordinance in accordance with state law. We'll submit the draft ordinance to the City Council with the BIC's input and recommendations for introduction and first reading. Would return the draft ordinance to the City Council with any requested changes for second reading and adoption. And then the ordinance would take effect 30 days after that adoption. Due to noticing, public hearing, and procedural requirements for the adoption of ordinances, any proposed permanent ordinance regulating warehouse development would not take effect prior to the August 5th 45-day expiration of ordinance number 1283, and that's the temporary warehouse moratorium. Under the government code, the City Council may extend the urgency ordinance and moratorium for an additional 10 months and 15 days. Staff is going to recommend that ordinance 1283 remain in place until the permanent zoning changes take effect. Final recommendations will be presented at the public hearing scheduled for the August 2nd, 2022 City Council meeting. And this concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions or comment.
Yeah, this is Doug Williams. I want to make sure I heard you correctly, that the staff's going to make recommendation to extend this for another 10 months, the moratorium. Did I hear that correctly?
No, you didn't. So what I had said was that the government code allows the council to extend it for 10 months and 15 days.
Yeah.
Staff is going to recommend that it be extended until the permanent changes take place. And so assuming that everything goes well at the August 2nd meeting, we make any minor changes the council might have, they adopt it at the second reading, and adoption takes place at the August 16th meeting. The new ordinance would take effect 30 days after that. And so as soon as that takes effect, the moratorium would go away.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. The other question I had, and I know that you and Scott Williams were looking into this with the how it came up to 150,000 square feet as the benchmark. How many parcels are in that cohort versus how many parcels are beyond that cohort, and what impact this would have to the development of warehouses within this framework for case-by-case basis development. You understand the question?
So I think you're asking how many parcels are less than 150,000 square feet.
Yeah, less than or equal to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do not have that number. I could make that, I could have that number at the August 2nd city council meeting.
Okay. The reason I'm asking the question is because it has impact for trade purposes, and obviously the larger than the 3.4 acres will revert to a case-by-case basis, and that's where capital markets are focused. They're not necessarily focused on 3.4 acres and less. Jack, do you agree with that? You're muted.
I would agree with it. The majority of potential in Vernon is 150 and less, and the bigger impacts to the city are 150 and more. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay, so we're looking August 16th plus 30, so we're looking the end of September when this thing pops up. Is that it, generally speaking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'd like to say that and comment in a very positive way that the city staff has done their homework. It is quite it's not a problem, but it is an issue to resolve and to solve. And I think that a lot of thought has gone into it. So I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
If I could just remind the commission that this is the portion for questions and that we will need to take public comment before you deliberate.
Dan, question for you. That 150,000 square feet, you know, some parcels are burdened by easements, being on a corner, street dedications, railroad easements, things like that. Is your 150, is that after the easements and dedications, or how are you looking at that?
Yes, I would look at it that way. If there's something dedicated for a public use, warehouse couldn't build on that. So that would not be included in that calculation. Similarly for railroad easements.
Thank you.
I have a question to Director Wall. We at this time don't know how many land parcels here that are over 150,000 square feet, but do we know how many registered businesses do we have that are classified as warehouses and that take up 150,000 square feet?
So businesses that are existing warehouses wouldn't be affected by this change. And to answer your question directly, no, I don't have that information as to how many registered warehouses are in excess of 150,000, are existing on parcels in excess of 150,000 square feet.
Dan, I have part of the answer just to put this in perspective, and this is from the last staff report that was mentioned in the previous item, the data sets that were attached. So I happen to have it in Excel. I was able to quickly filter it while we're discussing. So the problem comes in where we're talking about how a property is specifically classified, because as you know, there's a lot of nuances. You could have a property with a lot of businesses in one parcel, but just taking the data to put this in perspective of those that are allocated 100% to warehouse that are above 150,000, it's 41 parcels. And on the public safety side, and I don't know if any of these are even part of that mix, but that's 97. But there's on the warehouse side, it's just 41 that are 100% taxed in that way. So again, the assumption I'm making is that, okay, these squarely fit, but beyond that, we'll have to do some research.
The reason I'm asking this is because, I mean, it just, puts the whole thing into like, perspective, like, how many overall are, are currently classified and what, impact future, businesses, might have, potential applicants. Thank you for that information. Oh, and one more question is the existing 41 registered businesses that we are talking about, if they were to do improvements on their property, what kind of regulation or restrictions are we, looking at, and are they, I mean, are there like, exemptions, because they're existing, can they, make some sort of improvements? I don't know.
Yes, so we would treat them the same way we treat existing structures when they're required to come up to modern building code. And that is if these 41 parcels, if they wanted to expand the square footage of the building in excess of 25% of its existing size, then that would trigger the need to have a development agreement.
Dan, I have a client that has a property in Vernon. It's a 60,000 square foot 1970s concrete tilt up on 200,000 square feet of land. The property is currently being used for a warehouse. If my client, who is often talked about maybe developing the land and building a building, adding it onto that 60,000 or that 200,000 square foot parcel, and maybe even forget that one, just you could take any site where you have a 75,000 square foot building or with extra land. If someone who has an existing building is on north of 150,000 square feet and they go to develop the property, are they going to be subjected to the development agreement?
Yes, well, let me answer. It's a two-part answer to that question. So if they raise the building, the existing building, and start from scratch, yes, they would be subjected to it. If they increase the square footage of the existing building in excess of 25%, then yes, they would be subjected to it. If they stay under the 25% on expanding the existing building, then nothing happens.
I have someone who texted me, a fellow broker, who's asking if we had two or more legal parcels that are over 120,000 square feet each, I guess you're okay. I mean, it would encourage smaller buildings probably by having those two parcels, but any thoughts on that?
Well, yes. So if they wanted to build a single building across the two parcels, normally what we would do now is just make them do a lot merger. I mean, that's, because we don't want a building straddling two prop. So yes, I guess that might encourage somebody to build two separate buildings, all the, to stay under that 150,000. But I don't know what the economics would be for that. I don't know if that makes sense, so.
But do you believe the city would allow it?
Would allow them to build two separate buildings on those parcels? Sure, as long as, as long as each building meets the existing standards, for warehouse space, so.
And then during this moratorium, if somebody walked in tomorrow with a plan to build a cold storage building on a 200,000 square feet of land, 200,000 square foot parcel, would they be able to build that cold storage warehouse?
So we're not considering cold storage to be warehouse. Our zoning code our zoning code treats cold storage differently than warehouses and other transportation uses.
Thank you.
I've got another question. Because you brought it up, Dan, with regard to the environmental social justice or the environmental justice as it relates to pollution, what's been dialed in to the calculus for the acceleration of electric powered trucks that will be replacing these diesel trucks? And how does that, how are you factoring that in? And
when it happens, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we're looking at today, but we have to look at 10 years out. Just as a developer who's going to take a look at, for example, the Owens, Illinois plant, they're not going to build a factory there. They're going to take a look and they're going to figure out how to redevelop that. And it is a much larger parcel than 3.4 acres. So that is going to require your case-by-case basis development agreement. That development agreement would consider it's a long question. How do you dial in all of the future elements of transportation power to replace diesel, and how does that mitigate the pollution element of your concerns in the growth of warehouses in the city of Vernon?
So when clean trucks, so that's an interesting question. So one, as part of the development agreement, that could be one of the mitigations, is that only clean fuel vehicles are going to be used in and out, or maybe just on site. That's why this is a very powerful tool, because it allows for that type of negotiation. Also, if in the future there is no longer internal combustion engines or they're internal combustion engines that are burning hydrogen, then at that point, maybe we revisit this and this just entirely goes away.
Okay. Who has that data that the city's been talking to? Out
the future?
Yeah.
Doug, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you when the fleets are all going to convert to electricity. If I don't think anyone can at this point. Even the manufacturers aren't sure when their vehicles are going to be available, when the charging network is going to be available to recharge them, and it's going to be rapid enough, and there's going to be enough range on those vehicles for the wholesale switch to electric vehicles or other clean vehicles occurs. No one knows that.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to put you on the spot, so please don't take it that.
No, I'm not. It's just hypothetical. I mean, I can't deal on hypothetical. Oh, well, I take that back. Maybe I do deal on hypotheticals a bit, but my immediate concern is the Attorney General coming in and saying, Vernon, you're a dirty city. We're going to put these rules on you for warehouses. And oh, by the way, let's look at manufacturing. I don't want that to happen.
I get it. I get it.
Something to protect us.
Right. And that's why I think it's important that calculus of who wants to come in on a much larger parcel than 3.4 acres, and what is their distribution calculus, and what are they looking to do with electric powered trucks? I mean, it's coming, and it's not a crystal ball per se, but I think the experts have to help us so that we don't eliminate an entire industry of developers who who look at Vernon as a central city last mile and know that the transition's going to happen, they can help us solve this thing, can't they? I think they can. That's my perspective, and I think it's a task force that has to get involved with this within the parameters so that we don't drag on the moratorium longer than September 30th.
So that's part of the beauty of a development agreement. So if a developer comes in and says, hey, we're going to electrify our fleet in 2 years, then that's one of the deal points in the development agreement is you will have an electric fleet in 2 years, so you don't need to worry about mitigations.
Commissioner Morphin, here, to Mr. Williams's point, there is a warehouse and direct source rule being rolled out by the SQMD that would require warehouses greater than 100,000 square feet to be to take strides in improving their fleet efficiency and sustainability. So there is strides being taken by the state and by other agencies to improve that to that point.
Okay. Yeah, I'm aware of it. I know that Scott and I know that Dan are aware of it. I think we just have to be the tip of the arrow to drive the future into Vernon, as opposed to putting roadblocks in.
Dan, this is Jack Klein, and to add to one of Doug's points, the moratorium, at least along the lines based on your recommendation, will be lifted at some point in the near future. However the legal timing is for council meeting in 30 days. But the idea under the development agreements is there because that creates a tremendous amount of uncertainty on individual negotiations. But is there a way to help the city target objectives that are easily transferable from deal to deal? Speaking of Doug's idea of capital markets, they just want to know, what's it going to cost me, so I can put it in my pro forma, and then I can underwrite it, and that's the deal. Is there a way that we can assist the city in this establishing criteria that, this mitigation, what does that mean? How much of the electricity do they need to consume, whether it's per square foot, per acre, per whatever the criteria is, knowing that if it's an electrical service of any kind, it's good for Vernon. Obviously the trucking, recharging trucks is a great thing for Vernon, but to establish the criteria and then the kind of credit that guys get to whatever the city's financial objectives might be, because that's really, it sounds like, the way this whole thing started, right? We have two giant power users, they're both leaving. So can we help? And this is not to comment on your proposal. I think it's well thought out. I think it's right on target, and focus on really the challenges that our city has. But is there a way that we can assist in establishing some criteria that's can be used on one deal versus another deal and let the folks with the uses come and say, okay, well, our use has this amount of value to Vernon, so maybe whatever that development agreement says as far as what Vernon should receive out of the result of the development, and kind of just be able to help figure it out. Because anytime we try to be the tip of the sword and predict the future, or our air quality is not localized to Vernon. We can't do anything about the greater Los Angeles basin's air quality.
Right.
But we can hopefully assist in objectifying the development agreement issues, if we could, because I think that then you get everything that you want. You do not stop both capital markets as well as large parcel owners from achieving their financial goals, because essentially they're going to assist Vernon in achieving its financial goals. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And so, yeah, I would be more than happy after this goes through the council and gets implemented to have a group of developers or brokers or what have you, maybe a combination of them, to meet with city staff and to have a committee that kind of figures out what those agreements should contain in them. And like you said, what the trade-offs could be. Yeah, that's a great idea.
All right, thank you.
I have a question. I'm not in real estate and I'm not a developer, and I don't have any idea what these development agreements state. So I think, to Jack's point, it would be very helpful for me to see if there's either a draft version of such an agreement for the large parcels, or who determines the negotiation of these development agreements. Is it city staff? Does it get approved by city council? How does that work? Because that's very murky to me. And
so I'll answer that. So development agreements would be negotiated between city staff and the developer, and then they would be brought to the city council for its approval. So that's how the process would go. If the developer's not happy with what, with what's contained within that agreement, they could certainly go to council during, when the item is before the city council, and just say, hey, this is too onerous, so nothing would be forced down somebody's throat, so to speak.
okay, thank you.
I have one follow-up question with regard to the moratorium that we're talking about, that after the second reading and the August 16th and the 30 days after that, the implementation. What if it doesn't happen? This thing go on perpetually, the moratorium, or is there a sunset clause in there where it ends?
Yes. Yeah. So the moratorium ends at 45 days. So that'd be August 5th. So if August 2nd, the city council says, you know what, we don't want to regulate anything, then they wouldn't approve the item asking for an extension, and they wouldn't vote to have the first reading of the permanent ordinance go anywhere. So.
Okay, but if they do accept it, then it has a sunset 30 days after August 16th. Is that what you're saying?
No, yeah. So if nothing happens at all, except say that the city council on August 2nd extends the moratorium, they can extend it for 10 months and 15 days. So that would mean the moratorium in its totality was in effect for 1 year. And
then what happened? And then what could happen?
It would die if there were no action taken by the council. If the council chose to renew it at that point, which would be subject to a public hearing, then they could renew it for an additional 12 months. There are no extensions after that.
It just gives us time, Doug, to do the ordinance and the public comment. And that's why it'll take a couple extra weeks.
Okay, my concern is, and it is obvious, is that it gets postponed, and there isn't a certainty declared. And I think the Vernon has to have, at least in my opinion, a certainty declared, and I hope it's sooner rather than later, with regard to the warehouse construction. And I'm not talking about adding 25% to an existing facility. I'm talking about somebody, building a 400,000 square foot box somewhere for the purpose of being in Vernon under the case-by-case basis rule and the development rule. Time kills deals. is where I am, and I think the Vernon, at least from my perspective as a commissioner, I'm recommending that the quicker this happens to eliminate the moratorium, the better. under the provisos that Scott has laid out, or that Dan has laid out, which I think are very good.
Chair Klein, I just would like to remind you that these are for questions and we should take public comment before we allow deliberation.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Are there, all right, so are there any questions for staff? We started that. Are there any public comments?
Jack, I had Tom Condon here. I had one more question for Carlos and Dan. So I'm curious if there's Dan and Carlos, if you think that there's a way, through the staff efforts to set up some sort of, criteria for mitigation or development that is, standardized as opposed to the subjective, situation that we will run across with these development agreements. I mean, do you think that would be a possible way to go about this as opposed to going with the development agreements?
So we could create a standardized development agreement, and then it would still be subject to negotiation between the developers. Say that there's something that they're doing that hadn't been contemplated, and there's something that doesn't need to be mitigated based on whatever they're doing. Or say that they are doing something that had not been contemplated. For example, say that they want to build, say that there were a parcel that were adjacent to a school or across the street from a school in an adjoining neighborhood. Like Maywood has an elementary school that's next to an Amazon distribution facility. I don't know if that's a good thing without some sort of mitigation being considered. Currently, we don't have any way of controlling that or even asking for a mitigation there,
And let's go to public comment, and then we'll finish up with staff comments.
We currently have 4 raised hands. I'm going to start with John Sandberg. John, if you go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Wall. I understand you don't have a crystal ball and can't cite any studies on electric vehicle trucks today, but I'm sure that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, but I'm sure that there must be some out there. Having been in the city of Vernon, at least since 1940, so what's that, 78 years, we manufactured, at least there's got to be some studies that you could cite that indicate the differences between the years where manufacturing were more prevalent and meat packing had lower and safer and less polluting truck traffic than the current warehouse truck traffic is driven now, correct? Because I mean, in the 78 years that we manufactured, my experience was we had a lot of trucks coming and going, much more so than we do now as a distributor. I mean, that's just an observation, but manufacturing sure drives a lot more traffic, in my opinion.
Yeah, manufacturing also creates jobs. So that, there's the aspect of job creation, which benefits not just the city of Vernon, but benefits the local community is something that's always considered.
The residents of Vernon?
I'm sorry, if I could just remind the people making public comment, you're limited to 3 minutes.
Okay, great.
This is not, no, you're fine. I stopped your time, but this is not the opportunity for dialogue between
great. Then
you
let
and
me
staff. So go ahead and make your
let me finish my other 2 questions.
Perfect.
And then I'll mute. The Fontana construction, my question there was that a green open fields area, or was that backfill industrial like Vernon? And then along those lines, how exactly do warehouses have lower property taxes in a rising real estate market than older, even abandoned buildings in Vernon? And that concludes my questions.
Dominic, if you can please call the next speaker.
Okay, one moment. The next speaker we have is Steve Freed. Please go ahead, unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Or make your comments. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. I just want to confirm something under your 17.24.020 permitted uses. Is that section subject to only new warehouses, or does it also include existing warehouses? For example, I've got multi-tenant, I'm over 150,000 square feet, and I just want to ensure that I can continue to do, if I get a wholesale tenant or manufacturing tenant or warehousing tenants, I can continue to lease as I've always leased without any interference, without any CUPs, and that I can also add an office here and there into the interior of my building without triggering any of these issues. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Next speaker we have is Chavis Ferguson. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone. And
this is actually Eric Gustafson. We're Chavis logged in. Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. My question is seeking clarification. I wanted to ensure that I heard Dan correctly. You have an existing parcel that may be over the 150,000 square feet. Your building may be undersized or not maxed out to the parcel size. And if you want to increase your footprint because you need to grow for manufacturing and distribution, various purposes in your operation, that this would trigger the development agreement over 25%. Is that already existing as is, or would this change because of what we're doing with this new ordinance?
We'll respond to the questions following all public comments. So if you have any additional comments, you have 2 minutes remaining.
That's it for now. I can raise my hand again if I need to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just told you about it. It's nearly done.
Next, we have Ken Jackson. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Yes, good afternoon. I appreciate all of you who are involved in this. I've been building in around town for a long time. And yes, it was a little bit of a shock to the system. But I do think whoever came up with this idea is showing some serious forethought. This is going to get weird in Southern California. The Inland Empire is already becoming quite challenging. And I got to commend you guys. I think that there's something to be said for what you're doing. I would also say, as trucks become electrified, they do need to be charged somewhere. And ideally, if Vernon can utilize its utility weapons, it becomes a hub for those companies that want reasonable electricity prices and that they charge at their facilities. So I actually think that the future looks pretty favorable in that area for you guys. And I didn't really support the moratorium idea at the beginning, but I think Mr. Wall and the rest of the staff appears to be putting a lot of thought into this. And so I just wanted to say, good job.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Jose Cornejo. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I represent NAIOP SoCal. My name is Jose Cornejo, and we are still very concerned with this, with the moratorium. We are concerned with the development agreement because we think it does not allow for predictability. The comments raised about the standardized process by which people looking to develop warehouses or properties in general need to have some predictability of what's expected in order to make these financial deals work out at times. Part of the challenge that we'll find is that when looking to finance these deals, they need to be able to know what types of problems or what types of issues they're going to run into. And therefore, it becomes very hard to help finance and make these deals happen. It'll be more difficult. We believe that the development agreements provide too much uncertainty and would like some real specific criteria attached to what it is okay and what would someone be able to come through and say, I've met all these things and therefore my development agreement should be approved because I've met the following criteria. We believe that this moratorium also creates a very big problem for the already struggling supply chain system, and the lack of access to goods and services that the supply chain has caused to us will continue. The problem with this is that Americans, Californians, Los Angelinos, and people in Vernon are still buying everything via e-commerce, and therefore the supply chain interruptions are very staggering and very challenging for us. We would request work with NAIOP to continue to develop a better program that we are 1,100 members available and willing and working to help craft an ordinance that can be workable and that can work for the further development of these facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more raised hand from Jimmy Andrioli II. Please go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Awesome. Jimmy Andrioli II, representing Baker Commodities here in Vernon. Baker Commodities still continues to have concerns about this moratorium, not only for our properties, but potential future endeavors within the city. We would continue to ask that the city move quickly through determining what this final outcome is going to be and move away from an emergency moratorium. And that way there is a pathway for businesses to move forward rather than just being blocked from doing certain tasks within the city. And kind of similar to NAIOP's comments, we are certainly concerned about the predictability of being able to determine how to do business and how to move in businesses into the city of Vernon, which I think is something we definitely need to be focused on right now. But we certainly appreciate the position that the city is in with businesses leaving the state and such, and some of them being outside the city's control. So we appreciate the city continuing to work with local businesses and potential businesses. And that's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you. We have no further raised hands.
Dan, can I say something real quick?
If we could just give the speakers one more chance. If you would like to address the commission, please click the raise hand button. And I think Carlos did I cut you off?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. So I think that we all have to keep into perspective what our mission here at the city is and what we're here to do. And we are and will continue to be business friendly and always have been, always will be. We understand that there's a lot of concerns about uncertainty on how things get done in the future. But understand that this administration is here to serve the public and make sure that we are able to work side by side with our community to mitigate any kind of circumstances that arise in any kind of development agreement. So we will continue to strive to be business friendly and push these agreements out, if approved, as quickly as possible, because that's our mission here. Our mission here is to make sure that we maintain a competitive advantage for all our businesses here in Vernon as they continue to do commerce here in Vernon. So Dan, I don't know if you want to address some of the questions from some of the individuals that made comments.
Sure. Yeah, a couple of the speakers made comments about existing buildings and if this would apply to them. And no, this would not apply to an existing building as far as doing improvements within the building. The only time that this would trigger on a building that's on a lot greater than 150,000 square feet would be if there was an expansion of the square footage of that building in excess of 25%. And so if you want to put office space in, you're not going to trigger anything as long as it's within the building. You could have tenants come and go and do any kind of TIs they want to do, provided there's no expansion of the square footage. It's nothing's going to change from the way you're doing business right now. There was another question about air pollution and trucking levels from the past to the present. We live in a different time. We live in a time where we have the state who has created Cal-Enviro-Screen, where we're measuring for pollutants that we never dreamed of measuring for in the past, or we didn't have the capability of measuring for. And so to ask that question, how am I going to answer that? What I'm going to say is if we do nothing, the state's going to come in and it's going to dictate to us how we do business in Vernon.
So I think staff has completed their presentation. And so we'll be looking for direction from the commission on the next steps.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Commissioner Morphin. Yes, Mr. Wall, is the current staff in Vernon able to process these new development plans?
So we could certainly process the plans. As far as environmental analysis goes, what we've done in the past is that we enter into a three-party agreement with the developer, a consultant that is selected by the developer that's approved by the city, and the city. And so how this works out is that the environmental documents are prepared by a consultant who is paid by the city, and the city is reimbursed by the developer. And so that allows, that kind of keeps it the transaction up and up. So there's not undue, there's no arm twisting that's going on the part of the developer with the consultant. So that's how we've structured those in the past. That's an agreement that's been approved by the council, and that's how we would go forward. So that's one of the ways that we would streamline it. So there wouldn't be a bottleneck for environmental approvals at the staff level.
Dan, can you comment on how long you think time to market increases by doing this?
A lot of our processes in general could still be parallel. I would imagine that this may add between 3 and 6 months to our process. I just think, and these would be again for very large projects. So in the scheme of things, not, I mean, 3 to 6 months is still 3 to 6 months. But in the whole process, I don't think it's doubling the time that it would take for a project of this size.
Dan, this is Commissioner Klein, and I'm not quite sure we're done with questions, but is there a chance? I mean, again, what you're doing to eliminate the moratorium here and the recommendations are very well thought out. I think makes a lot of sense. Again, major concern that 3 to 6 months on a very large project, it's 3 to 6 months on hundreds of millions of dollars project, maybe time value of money, quite substantial. Is there a chance we can get together with a working group quickly to help establish the targeted criteria for Vernon. So as someone comes in, they're aware of what can make sense with a city. And we could do this in parallel with, the time required by law to eliminate the moratorium, not to change anything, but to add to and create a little bit more clarity. And as our friend from NAOP suggested, predictability. So folks kind of understand, because I think that's a general fear of folks, is that level of uncertainty, which in many times and in many cities, it's who's the staff du jour. And I know Vernon's not like that, but I think that could give everybody a sense of comfort with a very uncertain kind of process.
So I think I missed part of your question. So part of your question was about if it could be done in time for the August 2nd meeting. Was that?
No, it's to
Okay.
start now, so that there's not, okay, we pass this moratorium and 45 days from now, we still don't really know what the city wants out of a development agreement.
Oh, no. Yeah, we could certainly start talking about that now. I'm 100% open to doing that.
Okay. All right. Are there any other public comments? I guess we're done with comments, done with questions. May I have a motion?
Chair Klein, if we could go back to public comments, please. I think that if the commission's so inclined, there's a person with their hand raised.
Of course, yes, please.
There is one raised hand from Heather. Please go ahead and.
I think that if Dan, are you still there?
Lisa, we can hear you, yes?
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Heather, if you can enable your microphone to go ahead and make your comment or question. I'm not seeing. Heather, I see your microphone's enabled. I'm not hearing anything. And I see you are unmuted.
Where is he? He's putting on his bathing suit.
Where?
Uh-huh.
Does this, sorry, I apologize. Does this work better? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I had called in as well, as well as video, and I think that made a problem. Just a quick clarifying question. For the seeker reports, I wasn't quite sure I understood. Would the applicant be preparing the CEQA documentation, and then the city would hire basically third-party reviewers to review it? Or was the intent that the city would be doing all of the CEQA documentation itself without the applicant?
So the CEQA would be prepared by a consultant that the city would provide. The city would approve of the consultant that is selected by the developer. But the CEQA documentation would be prepared by a third party.
Was that the end of the question or comment, Heather?
That was the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we have no further raised hands.
Jeff, can you give me 3 minutes? I want to just talk to Dan offline, and then we can get back on, maybe take a 3-minute recess.
Absolutely.
So we'll call Chair Klein, if you could call a recess,
Can I call a recess?
please.
Is there a motion?
We don't need a motion. You can just call the
Okay.
recess and we'll
Boy,
come back
powers.
in 5 minutes.
Okay, a recess for 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
So now Chair Klein, if you'll reconvene the meeting, that would be great.
Okay, the meeting is now reconvened.
Thank you.
Carlos, did you want to add anything now or
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Yeah, so I just want to emphasize that as a city, our goal is to continue to be business friendly. And by no means are we looking for the development agreement on these very large parcels to stand in the way of development. What we're really trying to do is to just make sure that that development, which these large parcels are each one very unique, we want to make sure that the development of those parcels does not trigger a problem at the state level for what's getting built there. And at the same time that it makes sense for the Vernon business community. So that's why we're proposing development agreements. And that's, you know, like I said, each of these properties are fairly unique. And we would like to have the development agreement crafted specifically to that property by working very closely with the developer.
And I'll add one last thing is we're going to take a look at the timeline because we need to condense that timeline. So I'll be working with Dan to ensure that our time to market will be the fastest in any city in the surrounding community. So that's important to us. We want to maintain that business friendliness and also the time to market aspect of it. And so we will work internally to make that happen.
Thank you.
Terrific. Any other comments by the commissioners? Okay. So may I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to move forward pursuant to the schedule that was outlined by city staff today.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that motion. Commissioner Morfin?
And when you say move forward, I assume that means to recommend the city council adopt the changes?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any discussion? Okay. City clerk?
So we have a motion by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Vice Chair Morfin, to recommend the city council adopt changes to chapter 17 of the Vernon Municipal Code, implementing the regulation of future warehouse development by development agreement and including cargo container storage and cargo container parking in the definition of truck terminal. I will call the roll. Chair Klein.
Yes.
Chair Saktava.
Yes.
Vice Chair Morfin.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Condon.
Yes.
Commissioner Larios.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone? Motion carries.
Great.
Okay, are there any reports from the commission or staff?
No reports from staff.
All right, without any further business, I adjourn this meeting at 5:50 on July 14th. Thank you, everyone, for all your time and the